Hello, forensic students on quarantine. Hope you're doing well and I'll be back soon. In class today, we're going to keep working on our project, How Can New Technologies Involving Blood Types, Blood Pattern Analysis, and DNA Aid in the Conviction of Criminals? So today we're going to be talking more about blood spatter. Don't forget, there are pictures of our crime scene here if you haven't been able to see it because you've been on quarantine. In class today, we're going to finish watching Forensic Files Where the Blood Drops. If you're in first or second period, we're just starting that today. If you are in third or sixth, we're a little ahead and we're just finishing that up today. So be sure to watch this. It's an interesting case, and I think you'll find it interesting. Sorry, has a lot of twists and turns. So that's linked there. You should be able to watch that. And then after that, in second and sixth period, since we're a little bit ahead, we're going to start talking about blood spatter. So the three things we can use blood for: blood types, blood pattern analysis, and DNA. And we're going to work on blood pattern analysis now since we're finished with blood types. If you have any question about blood types, be sure to send me an email and I'll help you because that is kind of confusing. That game that we played yesterday really helps. All right, so let's take a look at this introductory PowerPoint for blood spatter. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So I want to go to slideshow from the beginning. Okay. We're looking at blood stain analysis. Some people call it blood spatter analysis. Some people call it blood pattern analysis, but it's all pretty much the same thing. We're just going to be looking at the way the blood has collected at the crime scene and knowing a little bit about the physics of how blood behaves when it's thrown through the air can help you when you're trying to figure out what happened. So looking at the next slide. Okay. Why is that doing that? I'm sorry. You guys know I'm not great with technology. I want to go back one. Okay, here we go. All right. I will be able to describe the properties of human blood, identify common blood stain patterns, and use blood spatter evidence to help interpret what happened at a crime scene. Those are the objectives for this PowerPoint. Okay. So some vocabulary. A passive blood stain is one where gravity has collected the blood and a person has not added any force behind that. So it's passive, it's just natural, and it falls because of gravity. A projectile blood stain, or sometimes called blood spatter, and I've also heard it called blood splatter. I don't think that's really wrong. I think most of the time it's referred to as blood spatter, but blood splatter is the same thing. That's when a person or a weapon has added some force to the blood and caused it to fly in a direction that would be different as if it was just gravity. And it's different depending on high, medium, or low impact, and we'll go over that. Transfer blood, that's when it kind of gets wiped on a substance, or if you put a handprint, that's a transfer blood stain. It's being transferred from one place to another. Satellite spatter, and I'll show you pictures of that, and that's when you have a droplet and a bunch of little droplets around it, and then a spine is part of a blood droplet. When the blood falls, you can see these little pointy things that are kind of sticking out, and I'll show you pictures of that. So properties of human blood, we've already talked about some of this stuff. Of course, it contains the red blood cells, and they are different in different organisms. We talked about how other organisms have different colors of blood. In our case, we have the iron, which that's what gives us the oxygen, also gives us the red color. Human blood cells are very small. I know you guys saw those under the microscope if you were here to do the lab. If not, then you can sort of see up here some very tiny, tiny microns of very small blood cells. Blood is cohesive, and that means that it kind of sticks to itself, and that's because there's water. And if we've learned about water in biology class, you know it's polar and it kind of sticks to each other. It has that cohesion property. Well, that's what's happening with the blood as well. It's sticking to itself, so it makes a round droplet. And here's a couple of pictures. So this is a passive blood drop. So like someone, if you cut your hand and it's just kind of hanging there and the blood drops from your hand, when it lands on the floor, it's going to create these patterns. These are the satellite droplets that are kind of splashed off. And then these spines that are coming around the actual blood droplets here, those you can actually look at those and determine things like what height you're dropping the blood from. So you can measure those and learn some stuff about it. In this case, if you have an elongated droplet like that, then it indicates that it's coming from an angle, that oval shape. That means the blood is falling at an angle. And we will look at some more of those. Some variations in blood drops, depending on what it lands on, you're going to have different types of blood. One thing we're going to be doing in the lab is dropping some blood on different surfaces. And don't worry, if you're on quarantine, I have an electronic version of the lab I'm going to post for you. We're not quite ready for the lab yet, but when we are, if you're not here, don't panic. There will be something for you to do. And now this is interesting too. As you go up in distance, if you go up in height there, then the diameter of the blood stain, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because there's more force behind it when it falls. Some other things we're going to be looking at, depending on the surface that you drop it, you may have different, textures to the blood drop. Like it's going to be different if it drops on the desk, which is smooth, or if it falls on cardboard, for instance. A blood pool, that means the person has remained in one place for a little while. And we do have a blood pool in our own crime scene, so that will give you some hints there. And then, of course, a trail, that's when somebody's walking or running and they leave the blood behind as they go. Smears, that's a transfer blood stain. So that's like if someone's trying to wipe up the blood, they might smear it or, leave a handprint behind. There are lots of handprints in our crime scene. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Okay, there we go. And swipe, that's kind of different. Like if you are walking and I'm trying to move this out of the way. Yeah, if you're walking and there's a place that has not been contaminated with blood, you might leave the bloody footprints or handprint there, swiping it as you go along. So we're going to be also experimenting with these types of stains in the lab if you're back by then or on the electronic version. Oops, gosh, sorry. All right, yeah, there we are. All right. So a splash can tell you what direction the blood came from. It's kind of like, I like this example here where it says it's shaped like an exclamation point with a tail. Like there's your exclamation point, boop, right there. So that can tell you what direction it's coming from, which could be very interesting. For instance, in our crime scene, the blood is all kind of doing an up and down pattern, and you can kind of tell like whether or not the criminal was taller or shorter than the victim by the way it's splattered on there. Arterial spray is caused by the pumping of the heart. So if you get cut, like in your carotid artery, it's going to pulse. The blood will pulse as it gets spreads out. Maybe that's a clue with our own particular crime scene too. And then, of course, you have the different types of energy behind the crime. So if you get stabbed, then it may be a low impact, it's just gurgling out. If you get hit, like blunt force trauma, like to the head, that's a little bit more force, so it's going to look more splattered. And this high impact, that's like a gunshot. And there's so much energy behind the blood that it just kind of mists. And that's what gives you this pattern here. Alrighty, so can you describe the difference between a passive blood stain and a projectile blood stain? Passive is when it's just affected by gravity. Projectile is when there's force behind it because of maybe a blow to the head or a gunshot. There's energy behind it that the person who is bleeding or the person who's committed the crime has caused all that energy. Okay, passive blood stain falls from the victim because of gravity, and projectile suggests momentum of force. All right. So determine the origin of the blood. So if you've ever seen Dexter, then you've seen this kind of, I'm trying to find a place to put my picture. There we go. Then you've seen this kind of setup here. Like I think he uses string maybe to determine where the blood drop is originating, what the point of impact was for the person who was victimized. So the lines of convergence can help pinpoint the location of the victim during the attack. And that is because these, you can tell by looking at the oval shape of the blood drop, you can tell it was from an angle. So if you kind of follow that pattern together, this is where your victim was standing or sitting or whatever. And the blood is splashed off in all of these places because there's a little bit of momentum or force. So this is not a passive blood stain. This is not something that gravity has done. This is some momentum or force behind that. Okay, moving on. Right, the angle of impact, that's kind of an interesting thing to do. And again, I'll have you guys doing that on the electronic version, but we're trying to figure out, like, depending on where the person was, like whether or not they were standing or sitting, you can figure all of that out by looking at the elongation of the blood, the impact. Sorry, go back one. There we go. So if you're looking at the angle of the impact, you can use some good old-fashioned math and figure out exactly where that blood drop came from. Oh gosh, I'm trying to move myself out of the way. So you can tell, like, if it was a 90-degree blood droplet, then it's coming from straight above. And then depending on where you are, you can tell sort of where the person was bleeding from by using some good old-fashioned geometry. So let me move on. Okay, so to determine the angle of impact, you're going to be looking at the blood drop, and you're going to take the length and the width, and you're going to find the angle of impact, which is arc sine width divided by length. So you'll end up, if you use a calculator, that would probably be the easiest way to do it. On the calculator, divide the width by the length, and then press the second button so you can get sine. So it's width times length times the sine, and that will give you the angle of impact. Okay. Oops, what I meant to do. There we go. All right. So here's an example of that. So you measure the parent drop, not the satellite droplets around it, not the spines around it. But you take your length, which is 1.1 centimeters here, 0.36 centimeters here, multiply those two together, and then take sine, and then you'll end up with the 19.1 degrees. You can also find the point of origin if you use the convergence rule. So this is what they do in Dexter. They take strings and they find the angle of impact, and then they pull the strings back and find the lines of convergence, and then they know, like, where the person was standing. It's a good way to try to recreate what happened at the crime scene. Okay, done. So if you have any questions about this PowerPoint, please be sure to shoot me off an email, and I will be glad to help you. So in first and second period, we're watching this forensics files and talking about that a little bit. And starting with the PowerPoint in third and sixth period, hopefully we'll be able to do the whole PowerPoint, and then we'll probably start the lab on, I guess, Wednesday. And don't worry, I will post a electronic version of the lab that you can do. So let me know if you have any questions, and you guys have a great day. Bye.